Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual evening with Aimee Nezhukumatathil to discuss her debut work of nonfiction, a collection of essays about the natural world titled World of Wonders, in praise of fireflies, whale sharks, and other astonishments, published by Milkweed Editions. As a child, Aimee called many places home: the grounds of a Kansas mental institution where her Filipina mother was a doctor, the open skies and tall mountains of Arizona where she hiked with her Indian father, and the chillier climes of Western New York and Ohio. But no matter where she was transplanted, no matter how awkward the fit or forbidding the landscape, she was able to turn to our world's fierce and funny creatures for guidance. Warm, lyrical, and gorgeously illustrated by Fumi Nakamura, World of Wonders is a book of sustenance and joy. Aimee is also the author of 4 books of poetry, including, most recently, Oceanic, winner of the Mississippi Institute of Arts and Letters Award. Other awards for her writing include fellowships and grants from the Guggenheim Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts, Mississippi Arts Council, and MacDowell. Her writing appears in Poetry, the New York Times Magazine, ESPN, and Tin House. She serves as poetry faculty for the writing workshops in Greece and is professor of English and creative writing in the University of Mississippi's MFA program. To moderate this evening's conversation is Jazwinder Bolina, whose own stunning debut essay collection of color was recently published by McSweeney's. Jazwinder is an American poet and essayist whose books include the collection of poems The 44th of July, as well as Phantom Camera, which won the 2012 Green Rose Prize in Poetry, and Carrier Wave, which won the 2006 Colorado Prize for Poetry. He is also the author of the digital chapbook, The Tallest Building in America, and his poems have appeared in various literary journals and have been featured in the Best American Poetry series. He currently teaches on the faculty of the MFA program in creative writing at the University of Miami. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and you can order a copy of Aimee's World of Wonders or Jazwinders of Color or any other book you might need for purchase at Books and Books below by pressing the green button. Tonight, whoever it is that orders a copy of World of Wonders, Aimee will kindly enter them into a raffle to win a complimentary copy of Jazwinders of Color. Every purchase you make helps keep Books and Books up and running during these really challenging times. So press away. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the stage. Hi, Aimee.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me on tonight.
We're delighted. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Jaswinder.
Hello, Aimee. It's wonderful to see you. I mean, see you as one does in 2020.
I know, right? Although, ironically, I don't know if you feel this way too. I mean, I think I've seen more of my writer friends more often in the pandemic through Zoom and Crowdcast and stuff more than I would normally. It would just be at AWP or something like that, some conference, and then that's it. So it's a weird, there's small little silver linings here. Not that I want to stay in this pandemic at all, but some silver linings.
No, but hopefully there'll be some good things that we can take with us. I mean, this amazing way in which people all over the country can tune in. Ordinarily, it'd be wonderful to have you here.
Oh my gosh,
hang out and talk and do things, but at the same time, family and friends and other people in faraway places can tune in, and hopefully they have tuned in. And so welcome to Miami, at Coral Gables.
I've got my Miami background here.
Yes, so. That's right. And I've got my from the fundraiser, my Books and Books t-shirt as a reminder to everybody to support the bookstore. I want to start off, I think the best thing would be to have you read maybe whatever you feel like from the collection, so everybody gets kind of a feel for it. And then I've got a bunch of my own questions here to get us started, and I'll be mindful of the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of our screen, and then share audience questions as we go. So I'm going to leave it to you to start us off.
Yeah, all right. I'm going to, what would you say, like minute-wise, Jaswinder? That's one thing I forgot to ask.
Hopefully, can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Okay,
So how many minutes would you say, just as a FYI? That's the cardinal sin, right? Never overstay your time, and I definitely don't want to do that here on Crowdcast. So.
No, but we don't want you to understay either. I would say that Crowdcast is a little bit trickier than a live reading, but I would say like 8 to 10 minutes. Does that sound good?
Oh, okay. Even
if that's too long, if you want to go short, then that's great too. But
maybe I'll go just a little bit shorter, because I have a feeling we'll have a lot to talk about. So
yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to read a little bit from a chapter here called Vampire Squid. And this is the cover of my book. I just wanted to point this out. I've never had a hardcover before. I'm a poet, so this is quite unusual for me. And I'm not going to pretend like this is just normal. So I'm so proud of this book and the way it turned out, just even physically. The cover here is designed by this incredible illustrator Fumi Nakamura, and inside there are illustrations that are just so stunning. It's like she reached into my brain and then made it better, on the page. So this is my favorite cephalopod, the vampire squid. And the Latin name is Vampiroteuthis infernalis. Way down deep in the perpetual electric night of the water column, a place where sunlight doesn't register time or silver filament, the vampire squid glides in search of a meal of marine snow. These lifeless bits of sea dander are actually the decomposing particles of animals who died hundreds of feet above the midnight zone. The vampire squid reaches for the snow with 2 long ribbons of skin, which are separate from its 8 tentacles. If it is truly hungry, it trains its eye on a glow, the lure of something larger, a gulper eel perhaps, or an anglerfish waddling through the inky water. The squid's eye is about the size of a shooter marble, but this is nevertheless the largest eye-to-body ratio of any animal on the entire planet. Now, if a squid feels threatened or wants to disappear, perhaps no other creature in the ocean knows how to convey that with a more dazzling yet effective show. When the vampire squid pulse swims away, each of its arm tips glow and wave in different directions, confusing for any predator. To make an even more speedy getaway, the squid uses jet propulsion by flapping its fins down towards its mantle and simultaneously blasting a stream of water from its siphon, all of its arms in one direction. In the next stroke, the squid raises all of its arms up over its head in what is called pineapple posture. The underside of these arms is lined with tiny little tooth-like structure called cirri, giving an appearance of fangs ready to bite down on anything that wants to chase it down for a snack. As if that wasn't enough to shoo away a predator, the vampire squid discharges a luminescent cloud of mucus instead of ink. The congealed swirl and curlicue of light temporarily baffles the predator, which ends up not knowing what or where to chomp, while the vampire squid whooshes away meters ahead. It's as if you were chasing someone and they stopped, turned, and tossed a bucket full of gooey green sequins at your face. I wished I was a vampire squid the most when I was the new girl in high school. We had moved around for so much of my childhood, but the most difficult move I ever made was between my sophomore and junior years. I moved from a class of about 100 students in Western New York to well over 500 in Beaver Creek, a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. I went from sophomore class president to a little no one, a gal who tried out for the tennis team not because I had any interest in the sport, but because at practice, at least, I didn't have to be alone. I ate lunch in the library. I ate lunch in a stairwell hardly anyone used. I ate lunch in the dark enclave of the only elevator hidden outside anyone's eyesight, except for the occasional student on crutches or in a wheelchair. Once, I ate lunch, my sad peanut butter and jelly sandwich, while standing up in a scratched and marked up bathroom stall. To pass the hour, I read the often vulgar, sometimes funny graffiti scrawled on the stall door, just so no one can see that I had nobody to talk to. That was my cephalopod year, the closest I ever came to wanting to disappear or sneak away into the deep sea. I had never feared the first day of classes or meeting new people before. But after tennis practice, when everyone else was making plans to meet up at the local pizza parlor, I made myself vanish. I don't know if my teammates even noticed or wondered where I went. Oh, I didn't finish high school like that, swimming in darkness. I did end up making friends, giggling with them in the back of the school bus. I joined a delightfully nerdy group of pals on the speech and debate team, and I eventually made varsity, playing doubles at the district level with my sister. There was no hiding anymore. And I think I'll pause there. Just to give you a little bit of taste, something a little bit about my childhood or teenage years, and a little bit of my nature writing.
That's actually a wonderful and perfect essay to start with, because it gives us a sense of the structure of the book. You do this amazing job of interweaving a kind of really approachable science writing with, I guess, memoir, really. So I want to start there, I think, in terms of my questions for the audience to kind of get a sense of how the book came together. Had you conceived of the structure like that? Did you sit down one day and say, I'm going to write a book that looks at nature and my life? Or did you have bits of memoir and bits of nature writing and then have like an aha moment where they all came together? How did this decision come about to bring these two subjects together?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I've done a ton of these and nobody has actually ever asked me that before. So bravo to you. Thank you. I think he'd be embarrassed to hear this, but it's true. I was dead set on just writing little snippets of animals and plants that I loved, period. Just pure nature writing, that's it. And my husband, who you know, he's a writer as well, Dustin Parsons.
Hi, Dustin.
He just, I think he might be tending to our wily chihuahua around here. But he was the one, he just kept saying, Aimee, this reminds me of the story when XYZ, about something about my childhood. And I was like, ugh, every time he said that, I would cringe because I was like, literally, you're the only one who cares, Dustin. And he's like, I don't know. I mean, I was like, really, who is going to care about me roller skating at a mental asylum? And he was like, okay, that's one of the most interesting anecdotes about your life that I knew when we were dating. And so I still even cringe thinking about that because I'm so used to, as probably you are in poetry, to have this veil, this wall, to not let people in, this, or at least this persona. Even if I'm writing from an autobiographical experience, it's a poem. You know what I mean? It's not straight up autobiography. So originally I pitched it like that. And so when the good folks at Milkweed were looking at my proposal, I got this phone call right away from the editor in chief, and he said, what would happen if you just put maybe 30% of your life in there? And I was like, oh, no, this is the wrong book. At first I was like, I just don't know. He's like, why don't you just try it for a little bit? And I did, and then I couldn't stop. And so I think I just really needed this this chance to kind of ignore the line break, to really kind of unfurl and to exhale, to let these stories kind of come to their full fruition, you know. And I'm so glad and grateful that I had people who could see the longer, bigger vision than me, because I was just, you know, I'm a big nerd at heart. So I could just talk, the whole book could have been about the vampire squid. And I'm glad I had someone who reined it in. And that's Dustin.
Well, no, a luminescent cloud of mucus. Yeah, I could see how you could do a poet, especially. I mean, that phrase is, I mean, you just read it and it's memorable, you know, and that I think that is testament to the way in which the poetic side filters through in some of the phrasings and the sentences.
Oh, thank you.
And it's just I think one of the differences between reading a book of your poems, where you do so many different kinds of experiments with form and purpose and tactic. Here, I think what was notable was just the structure. It felt so deliberative in the way that it's put together, and so it's kind of amazing that, you know, that Dustin or somebody else kind of seeded that idea, because it feels quite natural, you know, and I thought to myself, well, how could somebody know this much about biology and you know, flora and fauna, and then also think to bring it together? But what I love about bringing in the autobiographical is that I think you reach a different kind of audience, because if it had been strictly a science, kind of a nature book, that's one thing.
Interesting.
And then you bring in the personal. And so that will lead me to one of the, I think, other kind of just basic questions that I have, and I'm guessing that readers will have when they pick up the book. You moved so much as a kid, like so much. And just the first few essays, I remember taking notes and writing like Kansas, upstate New York, Iowa, Phoenix, Chicago, like you were all over. So maybe give us a little bit of context for why all the moves, and how you managed. Most of us would not have ended sophomore year happy and giggling. We would have been traumatized in some way probably. But so why all the moves, and how did you negotiate all of them?
That's such a good question. Yeah. So, well, the first part is easy, and that is, you know, why all the moves? My mother, both my parents are retired now, but my mother was a psychiatrist, and she had appointments at various mental state hospitals. They call them state mental institutes. And many of them are defunct now, but many of them also were in these rural places like eastern Iowa, western Kansas. And so about every 4 years is when her contract ended, and we had to pick up and move. So sometimes when my mom wasn't sure about a place, or when my family wasn't sure about a place, we lived, and sometimes the deal was so great. Some of these mental institutions had places, what was called the doctor's quarters. So they'd be these like giant kind of, what is that word? Oh, I need, kind of like almost McMansions in a way from the 80s and 70s. They weren't called McMansions then, but just a place to live a little separated from the hospital, but on the grounds. And then some did not. So that's when we, like, for example, in Arizona, we lived in our first full-on house that we had custom built, and it was so beautiful, but we didn't get to stay there very long, you know. So there was that. And, you know, one of the things that my dad was so instrumental in is that he made sure, both my parents, but primarily my dad, made sure that we knew the names of plants, animals, rock formations, you know, depending on where we were, and also most importantly, the constellations. So I never felt lonesome. I could always look up and say, oh, there's my old friend, you know, the Pleiades, or you know, the Small Dipper, or you know, or something, you know, and it just never occurred to me that there was any other way to live until that painful move in the middle of high school.
I mean, so that actually, it remains extraordinary. Like for any child to be moved around that much and come through that with like so much grace and optimism and everything. It's wonderful. And the thing that the other question that I think I have, and I don't hope it's not too personal, but your parents play such a crucial role in the book. You talk about them in so many different ways, and obviously so much of the way that you speak about them is deservedly adoring. They sound like they were really wonderful to navigate all of that. And one thing that I noticed about the structure, and it corrects me, please, if I'm wrong about this, but it's interesting that I feel that the connection to the natural, your father would take you for hikes up in the mountains and take you into places and show you all these things, that there's that one thread of the natural and biological running through, and then there's so much strength on display in your mom, dealing with so much of what she had to deal with, which you write about movingly, and it's difficult at times to just even conceive of one's mother or anyone's mom being treated by racists and others in such a horrible, demeaning way. And so those two, I think both those threads come together. So I'm going to ask you kind of a basic question. How did they meet? How did your parents, how did these two amazing people come together and start a family?
Yeah, so my mom is from the Philippines and my dad is from South India in Kerala, and they met in Chicago. And one of their first early dates was one of the last times Elvis Presley played a concert in Chicago. They were both big Elvis fans. So it's, it is stunning because they come from kind of almost two totally different worlds. My dad is Catholic, my mom is Methodist. And, I think their love language, I hate that phrase, but their love language, one thing that they just always have the same vision on, no matter what kind of disagreements they might have about whatever, their love language has been in the garden. And so for me, it was always a place of refuge and a place of peace and solace. I never saw anybody, even if we were at a nursery or something, nobody ever challenged my parents because they were the most knowledgeable people in the nursery. Nobody treated them like, the horror as a little kid who wants to just assimilate so much, and then watching some idiot behind the counter saying to my super intelligent, multiple degreed mother, "Hello, can you speak English?" You know what I mean? And I didn't have the language of the vocabulary for it. And so I want to be clear, I'm embarrassed that I didn't get mad or defend, my mom, but I was 8. I didn't know what to do except to just be quiet. And I think this whole book is just one kind of the way I look at it. And, in junior high, I wasn't always the, hey, let's hang out in the garden. I talk about that. All I wanted to do was be in air conditioning and watch MTV nonstop and just eat potato chips, But I think this was my big, kind of just one big love letter to my parents, that even when I wasn't listening, I was listening, and I always was observing. This is my giant apology, love letter to them, and just appreciation, really, that they were navigating this world, this country that they love so much, even when it didn't always love them back, and I know that that's a place of privilege. I know that, for example, I have Black friends that do not feel safe being outside, who can't stand the thought of even being in a forest, or don't have any experience being outside. So I'm aware of that. And I think it's important to raise those questions too, of who gets to be outside, who doesn't, who has access to being outside. My parents both worked 80-hour weeks, but they found some strength or some time to be able to take me into the garden, or to go with them on nursery errands, or hiking in the mountain. I don't know, that was just the best gift. They wanted me to be a doctor, and it turns out the best gift for a writer was doing what they did.
Yes, no kidding. I mean, it is extraordinary, the breadth and depth of your knowledge that so clearly came through. And absolutely, the gardening, it comes up a lot in some of the essays. And I think that the affection and respect and admiration for your parents is really the sort of heart and soul of the essay collection. It kind of it runs through, and if it is a love letter to them, it's remarkable because by the end of it, one simply can't help but just absolutely admire these people.
Oh, that's the greatest. That's the greatest. I know my parents would be mortified. They also don't read very much. I mean, like my dad will read science magazines. They've got the Reader's Digest and stuff. So this is all still very new. This is, they knew that they come up a little bit in my poems. But again, they have that veil. I trained them for so long saying, Mom, just because I mention a mom doesn't mean it's you necessarily, even though it mostly was. But, so now it's like, wait, this is me, like me, so they don't, this is still a concept that they're not quite familiar with.
No, and I have a lot of empathy for that. I mean, and it's interesting too. So I think one of the other basic questions, and there are questions coming in from our audience that I'm going to incorporate in a few minutes here. But one of the other basic, I think, questions that a reader might have is that with this voluminous and detailed knowledge of the natural world, how did you avoid a fate in the sciences as like just a career path or whatever you want to call it? How did you find your way to writing instead? And how did these, science, as a child of immigrants myself, there's a real pressure towards some science and fields that might be more profitable, shall we say, than poetry. So how did you end up kind of not following a biological naturalist path and into writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I have kind of a flip answer, but it's the truth. And that's, I could not deal with organic chemistry labs. I could not deal with it. I had been a straight A student all my life, and I got to chemistry in college and I just hit a wall, and I was struggling. The struggle was real, as the kids say, and it really came to, I feel like I've told this story so many times, but in a bigger nutshell, truly I was just hanging out in the honors dorm, procrastinating from an organic chemistry lab, and someone had left a sheet in the study lounge. And when I just was procrastinating, so I picked up the sheet. Unbeknownst to me, it was just this block of writing. And it was a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye. And the poem itself is called Mint Snowball, and people can look that up. But this literally, some people are like, oh, I've been writing all my life. This wasn't until junior year in college, where I didn't even know there was any living poets. That's how bad my high school education was. And I was an AP English student, I just didn't, I had no concept that there were living poets. So I read this poem. It's like what Emily Dickinson said, the top of my head felt like it was taken off. I pinned it up on the bulletin board and said, whose homework is this? Please see Amy in, room 324. And someone down the hall, a guy, knocked on my door and was like, hi, that's my homework assignment. I need it back. Also, it's called a poem. I was like, what? I didn't even know this was a poem, So when I say I started from scratch, it was kind of from scratch. I had been telling everybody, including my parents, that I wanted to be a doctor, kind of going through the motions. And I saw how much it made them light up. I literally would get applause at doctors' parties when I would say it. And so I didn't really know that there was any other options, but I fell in love with this poem. That next week, maybe 2 weeks after, I dropped the chemistry major and I switched to English.
Wow. And that is going in with both feet, right?
It is. I had no idea what I could do with it. All I know, and that I feel it in my bones when I say it, all I know is that I didn't know if I wanted to do anything with poetry as a career. So it still is, every day I'm amazed that I'm a professor of English. But I felt it in my bones that if I did not continue to have this discovery of poetry and reading every day of my life, I would be a shell of a person. That sounds so dramatic, but it's the truth. And it was junior year in college at Ohio State. So it was a shock, to say the least. It was not so smooth when I was telling my immigrant parents what I wanted to do, but now they're like my biggest fan. So.
Well, I would hope so. And at this point, there's that continues to this day with my family, but it's like, I think it's safe now.
Yeah.
We published some things. It's real. It's not a total pipe dream. I mean, it's still not lucrative, but it's still it's what we do.
I think they exhaled when I moved out of the house and could have I health insurance. They were pleased when that happened. So
that's a big one.
Yeah.
Let me ask a couple of these questions before we get too many in the Q&A on in Crowdcast here.
Yes, keep them coming.
Yeah, no, we had a test question from Books and Books, but that one, so I'm going to skip over that one. But related a little bit to this poetry and prose thing is Audrey Hall asks the question, how does the process of putting together a book of prose compare to putting together a book of poems?
For me, it was quite similar. And not at all do I say that this is the be-all, end-all. But I love that question because I love these kind of nuts and bolts craft kind of questions. And it's the same thing. I kind of line up, I printed out the entire thing, drafted and I feel guilty because, I teach environmental writing, I teach environmental literature, and here I'm printing it out. So, double-sided, but I print the whole thing out, and then I just make stacks of my essays on my office floor, and then I just start seeing which one. So for me, I was pretty sure I didn't want to do this chronologically, to give you kind of a little bit what you mentioned, Jaswinder, like the sense of just kind of jumping in and kind of being a little unsettled, like, wait, she was in third grade here, now she has a child, that kind of thing. And I that was deliberate. I knew I wanted to do that. And I had some great readers, Beth Ann Fennelly, who helped me who encouraged me anyway to do that. I was so nervous. I should do this from 4 years old till last year, chronologically. But I wanted to see where the essays have conversations with each other. Same thing that I do with poems. Where do the conversations begin, the last image, and then the opening image of the next one? And where do they kind of almost have arguments in some ways? And then also, where do you kind of recurring, and I don't do this while I'm writing, but only after the process, where do you maybe some recurring images happen? There was a lot of stars. There was a lot of bits of light, things like that often appear in my poems. And I wanted to make sure not all the stars appear in the first half of the book, and then it ends in darkness, or vice versa, So those three things, just kind of to see where the beginnings of, where the endings of one essay kind of jolted or kind of were seamless into the next. And I wanted to have a variety. I definitely did not want it to be like, as we open the page on Aimee Nezhukumatathil's life as a 4-year-old, and then ending with just last year in 2019, that kind of thing. So
no, and it's very, I think it was an astute decision not to start at the beginning, because you instead, this way, you present a speaker at the outset in all of her complexity and sort of and if you start at sort of at 4, I did this, a reader would, I think, have to learn quite a bit along the way, whereas readers are smart, and this book treats them that way, where you drop them right in, and we pick up very quickly on the way.
Oh, good. Yeah. I was very worried about that. So yeah, thank you.
No, and I think but that's why I asked some of the questions I did too, was just, I was trying to think as a reader, what would I want to know kind of entering in? And there's so much wonderful, like there's a write-up, about the book, and on the back, you always have blurbs and things like that. But I think it might just help a reader to know the different threads and different kind of structural things here. And so really quickly, just to dovetail up at the end of Audrey's question, is how is putting that together different from putting together a book of poems?
It's very similar, actually. Okay. So yeah, so it's almost the exact same process. I print them all out. I look to see how that last image, the last breath in a poem speaks to the opening one. If I wanted more of a space, more of a kind of time travel jump, then I would make a section break. But otherwise, it's almost the exact same. I need to see them in order to, and I also read them all out loud, so that takes a lot of time. And my poor children know, oh, mommy's talking to herself, so let's not bust in. The rule is, when I'm at that stage of revision or putting together a manuscript, they know they can come in. But they need to limit. Ideally, it's like nobody's bothering me unless they're bleeding. And knock on wood, so far it's been great. But they know,
not a lot of blood, I hope.
No. They know that as long as and I encourage it. If they want to come in and read with me while I'm writing and stuff, they always have. They sit on this couch. Actually, my youngest sits on this couch and reads, does his homework while I'm writing, and I love it.
That actually sounds idyllic. We have a 2-year-old. There's no
yes.
couch while we're
Oh,
working.
trust me. When this child was 2, I told you right beforehand, he was nocturnal. So I did not think I would ever see this time. So, I always didn't like it when people would be like, hang in there, you'll miss these days. I was like, no. And I don't miss those nocturnal days, actually. And it's okay to say that. I love him at 10. At 2 o'clock, I loved him. I just did not know how to function pouring coffee, in the wrong places in my kitchen because I had no sleep.
Yeah, no, we know how that feels here.
Yes.
So here's another advice kind of thing. There was a little bit of a tip for the young parents there, but how about this for writers? There's no name on the question, but what originally drew you to creative nonfiction as a genre, and what suggestions would you have for writers who are curious about trying it?
Well, I would say, so for when I was in grad school, my actual degree is in both poetry and nonfiction. I had early success with poetry, and so I just kind of kept going on with that. But my thesis was, half poetry, half nonfiction. So it was a place for me to, so I didn't really make the decision. I just could not deal with, I've been calling it the tyranny of the line break. There's, especially when I started putting a little bit more of myself unabashedly into my nonfiction, I just didn't want to have to wonder, where's the line break coming? Where's that tension coming? I wanted to end with a period when I said it ends, and I wanted to be able to unfurl and just stretch my legs out as long as I can. And I recognized when I was recording the audiobook for this, a lot of my sentences are full on unfurling, stretching, long sentences. But I would say that to begin with, it's a site. There's still small places. So I still always read nonfiction, but I think if you wanted to just kind of get a taste or a flavor, maybe just some inspiration, there's a site called Brevity. Brevity. Gosh, I should know the website address, but if you go Brevity and then say creative nonfiction. It's a short, I think no piece is more than 500 words. But I just, what I love about that, I teach from that site very often too, is you see just such a breadth and depth of what you can write about. Or oftentimes it takes my breath away when I read a piece from there saying, oh, I didn't know you could do that in an essay. And it just makes my, horizon expand further and further to think, oh, maybe I'll try this or something like that. So I should know this. Brevity.
I feel like I should know this too, because the founding editor is a good friend of mine, Dinty W. Moore.
Yes, indeed. I know.
Brevity was run, and is still, as far as I know, for many years out of one of my alma maters in Ohio at Ohio University. So shout outs.
Yes, brevitywordpress.com. Wait, no, that's not right. Brevity Mag.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Brevity Mag, but then if you get the website slightly wrong, you end up in a place you don't want to be. So I didn't want to. But no, Brevity Mag is that'll be great. If Dinty's not watching, I will tell him later that he got shouted out. I know you got shouted out, and all of those old friends back there. This, I think, something you just said kind of lends itself to this next question from Jean Rosenberg, which I think the second half of this question, did you study biology? We already got a little bit of insight, but actually I had a question similar to Jean's. They asked, what made you focus on a creature like the vampire squid that, say, unlike the peacock, inhabits a realm which is alien to humans, although you do have peacocks as an essay in here too. But did you know ahead of time the various flora and fauna and things you were going to write about, or did you kind of decide along the way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, because I don't think I completely touched upon this last time, last question. So there's no kind of works cited at the end, because and this sounds so nerdy, so you just have to see it on my face. This is just me, a lifetime of reading these books since I was, 6 or 7, on the floor of my libraries.
Wow.
And being sick of being pushed to the kids section and then sneaking into the adult section so I could read books on shells or the secret life of plants or ants or the search for the giant squid. I say that that's my dirty little secret, but I've been saying it on these little Zoom chats or Crowdcast chats. It's not a secret anymore. I read a lot, but I read double the science and nature and history books than I do literature. So this is me just kind of distilling a lifetime's worth of information. I did make a list. I had over 200 plants and animals that I wanted to talk about. I ended up with 30. And one way to distill that down was just, I needed to feel some sort of, so that's 200 that I felt I had a connection with. But the ones that didn't feel forced to me, or that I just felt that electricity when I was writing, when I was daydreaming about these animals. Those are the 30 that made it into this book. But this could have been quadruple the size, and I would have been happy with it. But I'm very glad that I culled it down to my favorite top 30. But yeah, this easily, and every day, actually, just even yesterday, I was lamenting, why didn't I do something? There's something called the sea dragon. It's a little blue, poisonous creature in the ocean. And then there's something called the peacock spider. I mean, every day there's something like, why didn't I include this? And I should have pushed myself more. And so this is just, it's a big nerdy way of saying that my idea of a good time still is the same as it was at age 7 to now 45. And that's reading a book on science and nature.
Well, it's remarkable you remember all of it. I do a fair amount of magazine, periodical reading in the science, but not books. And I have a terrible memory in general, but I just don't remember. It's astonishing that you remember so much.
Well, to be sure, I was triple fact checked, and to make sure, everything was fine. But really, more often than not, with a couple spelling errors, and maybe a couple spelling and just a very few couple changes in terms of the science aspect, was pretty much, just based on what I said earlier, I'm either the world's best dinner party guest or the worst, depending on what you want to talk about at dinner.
Well, it also probably depends on who you're with and what you're eating.
Exactly. Yeah, do you know about that octopus? Let me tell you about that calamari. So
let me switch gears a little bit in terms of the questions. One of the other aspects of this book that we've focused on a lot of the biology and the natural stuff, and even just the details of autobiography. But the other threads running through the book are they're pointed in a different direction. They're sort of they have an attentiveness to social justice issues and equity, like that, because of the fact that your parents were immigrants of color. You write in an essay like "Touch Me Nots" in a kind of understated way, but in a very clear way about the way in which women's bodies are objectified and abused, for lack of a better word. And so maybe the question might be something. Where did, when you're writing these essays about nature, did the impulse towards talking about human interaction and social issues like racism and sexism, were those things, did they become very clear right away, or was it a thing that you kind of had aha moments later? And how did you, weave these different kind of subjects together?
Yeah. I wish there was a better answer, but I couldn't look away. And these were happening almost real time in many cases as I was writing them. In the case of the Touch Me Not plant, actually, I remember putting final kind of edits around the time and I was actually in Miami in the, what is that, magnificent hotel when I visited the University of Miami's MFA program. It's like a old style.
Was it the Mutiny? Were you down on the water?
Yes, it was closer to the water. Yeah, I think so. It was like old timey. Anyway, watching that, watching the Kavanaugh hearings as I happened to be writing about the Touch Me Not plant. So how could it's almost like I would have to have purposely made an effort to not at least a reference or let's just say I could not include it. There's an essay I have on the flamingo. I had every intention on just talking about the color and their fun little dance that they do, and just the first time going out to a club with my girlfriends as an undergrad. And as I was writing that, I mean, it's the most horrifying coincidence. A young undergrad from Ohio State was killed walking home to her car, was kidnapped, abused, and left for dead in a local park as she was coming off of her waitressing shift. And I was a waitress when I was in Columbus. So I would have had to, I don't know how I could have avoided not, having that. So it absolutely was not like, I'm going to write about flamingos and violence to women, for example.
Right.
I happened to be writing about flamingos. I had all the knowledge about the way their feathers turn black when you fly, what they eat, the salt marshes where they nest and breed. And then this happened. So, and then also fairly recently, this happened in Tampa on the other side of your state. One of the mascots of the of Busch Gardens was killed by a deranged visitor to the park in front of a bunch of kids. I don't know if you got to that part yet, but they picked up this flamingo who was the mascot of Busch Gardens and threw it.
Oh, wait, no, I know this is from I don't know the news. I didn't recognize the news story, but like I didn't know that happened until reading it in your book. So it was not something I was familiar with.
And and this happened in front of a bunch of kids, and this was the most beloved. This is like someone killing Mickey Mouse in front of kids, except this was a real, not a cartoon mouse. This was an actual bird in front of kids, and they had to euthanize this flamingo. So it just, it almost, I don't want to say it wrote itself, because I would never want these incidents to have happened. But it takes a certain amount of privilege to be able to look the other way, and I couldn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, and some of these things, like that's one of the other threads here is that, like a news story, I missed that news story. I just didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting thing to go back and relive some of the moments that we might recognize or might have missed in the news and in sort of politics and culture, which you touch on, throughout. And so I think that maybe leads to, or lends itself to, another kind of related question is what was the time frame in which this was written? I mean, when you read the book, you can piece it together, and in many ways it was probably written over your whole life, but how long when was the first essay written? What was the time frame?
The very first, I mean, the beginnings of the Peacock essay and Monsoon were written in grad school. Actually, that was part of my thesis.
Wow. Okay.
I just been sitting on them, and I mean, I kind of just put those to the side, and my poetry was taking off. I got married, I had kids, and then this was just all simmering in the back. So those were the earliest scratchings, literally from my MFA thesis, and then all the way up through 2019. I was working. I had the contract in hand from the time I moved to Mississippi, so around 2016 and onward. And so that's when I knew I had a project with deadlines. It wasn't just fanciful, let me write about, this beautiful bird today. It was like, okay, you've got deadlines to go, let's go. And, the election happened. And I think that also made me want to break out of any sort of constraints. And, it's dramatic. It's over dramatic when I say the constraints of the line break. But it also got me thinking about whose stories get to be told at that particular time about being outside and whose doesn't. All my life, all those books that I read, none of them featured anybody who even remotely looked like me. I was lucky to find a female author growing up, and some of my writing heroes are, Annie Dillard, Rachel Carson, Terry Tempest Williams, David Gessner, many of whom are alive today. And yet, as a child, we're in the same kind of generation. Growing up in the 70s and 80s in suburban Chicago, I never saw anybody that looked like me outdoors, depicted in any movie, TV show, music video. They were just never outside. So it's, in a weird way, it's like, are Asians not supposed to be outdoors? And if they were depicted, it was like literally a gong would appear, when
a kind of exoticized version.
Yes, it's totally stereotypical version, or they were the computer nerd, which I wasn't. And so you start to internalize, like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be outdoors. And that was very much at odds with, but I love being outdoors. But where are the people who look like me who are writing about the outdoors? So it just, something kind of snapped, as it did with many of us, I think, in 2016. And I was like, I want to write the book that I've been searching for my whole life, essentially. And I wanted it to be full of joy, but I also did not want to look away from darkness and pain and ugliness, and some gentle warnings of what could happen, that kind of thing, if we ignore climate change realities, and things like that. So, but I know, now that I'm here in the South, there's that saying, you catch more flies with honey. But my hope, and I'm so glad that you mentioned it, that you see that my love for these plants and animals are hopefully contagious, and it makes you want to be a little bit more protective of the potu or the cassowary bird or the touch me not plants or just any creatures. And hopefully that inspires people to want to learn more about their own backyard,
No, it absolutely does. And it's a strange thing to watch all these wildfires in California.
Yes. Oh my God.
Kind of, we're at the forefront of climate change here in Florida. And to read the book, it makes you think of what's being lost. And there is a way in which it becomes so poignantly immediate in reading the work, and I keep kind of going back to that as I watch these fires blazing.
The world is literally on fire, and I mean it's
on fire on one side and flooding on the other. And this book, I think, is it's a testament to at what cost those things are happening. Because it's so personal and it's so well acquainted with the natural world. I don't want to end on too dour a note. I know we're getting close to the end of our hour, but there is a question here from Jean Rosenberg that actually reminded me of a question that I wanted to ask. It was the same question. How did you team up with the illustrator Fumi Nakamura? How did that happen? It's a gorgeous book. It's full color. There's spot color throughout. There's full color illustrations. How did that happen? Was that before Milkweed, after Milkweed? How did that all come together?
No, that was kind of my dream and my vision. And, Milkweed was one of the only... Every time I mentioned to, a publisher in my talks, when this book was being shopped around, hey, what I would really love to go back to that place. When I first started reading, it was picture books, of different shells and stuff. And I just remember being able to look at the picture or read the little small passage, then turn back to the picture, look at it again with a new knowledge and more wheels spinning, for lack of a better word, to say, oh gosh, my world has expanded a little bit more. I feel like I've traveled without leaving the floor of this library. I wanted to go back to that kind of childhood sense of wonder I had exploring old science books. And I love the idea that Mary Austin Speaker had with doing that spot color, as you mentioned. It reminds me of the old textbooks and stuff that I rummaged through. But really, it was so, I just did a massive internet search and searching for somebody who could capture, I wanted these, it was very important to be biologically correct, anatomically correct for these animals and plants. But I did want maybe like 3% whimsy to show just a little bit of playfulness, and so there was the artist who would be like, oh, you want whimsy? Let me put a face on a plant. And I was like, whoa, not that much whimsy, And then Fumi Nakamura, when I came across her portfolio, she shot to the top of my list, and I was like, please, oh, please, oh, please. I hope we can afford her. I don't even know if she's going to think this is crazy to suggest illustrations for a book. And when she signed on, it lined up perfectly. That was my first choice. She nailed it. I didn't even have to do any, like, hey, can you make this bigger? This is a weird proportion. Nothing like that. So it just was best case scenario. I'm spoiled now for life if I ever do illustrations again. And it was also important for me to have an Asian American artist, because in those books that I was looking at, I wanted, I wanted people to see my brown skin for my author photo. I did not want it to be black and white. And, by the way, my publishing team was behind me 100% on this. They didn't blink or balk at any crazy suggestion I had. I wanted to show my brown skin, the skin that I was maybe sometimes embarrassed about growing up. And I wanted people to see that it was an Asian American team who brought the pictures and the writing together. And Milkweed was behind me 100%, and I'm so grateful for that. It's my dream book. It's my dream book.
I mean, they did and not surprisingly, they have a lot of gorgeous books, an amazing list, and but this book is beautiful.
Thank you.
And everything about it. And we are here comes Christina.
This is actually a galley that I'm holding that I got in Baltimore.
Oh, fantastic.
When we were at Winter Institute.
Yes.
And it seems like a century ago since that happened. Right?
In the before times.
All the booksellers were like, and this was the buzz book. Like, you would look at the line, and it was like a block long to get this galley signed. And it is so worth it. It is such a beautiful book, filled with joy, filled with wonder. I thank you for writing it, for working on it. Thank you, Jazwinder, for the wonderful questions.
Jazwinder, this is so great.
I have so many more questions after this, but we don't have time. So.
I just really want to remind everyone that you can order this book, and that whoever orders it first tonight, or actually orders it tonight, we're going to enter you into a raffle, and you're going to get a copy of Jazwinder's book as well.
So good. And I want to tell you, Jaswinder, I thought you'd be delighted and horrified slightly. I completely ignored my kids for an afternoon, and I read this cover to cover when I got it. I pre-ordered it. I got it, and I sat in this orange chair and said, Mommy's busy, so don't even, again, unless you're bleeding, do not interrupt me.
Thank you. I don't encourage child neglect, but thank you very much.
I know. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I wanted to say the questions while searching for birds with my half-white sons. I love that section of the book as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, for watching tonight. Take good care. Please order the book from Books and Books, and we'll see you the next time.
Support independent bookstores.
Yay. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.